All right, so another Thursday evening, our usual time, 6 p.m. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another exciting evening for all you wildlife and nature lovers, brought to you by WNPS along with NTB. And today is going to be a cracker session. It's something I've been looking forward to for a long time. And before we get on to talking about the upcoming session today, let me get on with a few announcements and the usual. Um, like I said, for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, my name is Srihan. I'm the president of the WNPS, but most importantly, I'm your host for tonight. And we're going to meet and chat with Dr. Sampath later on. But let me first kick off by thanking our sponsors, Nations Trust Bank. Watch out for the lovely green wave that they've introduced as icon for all the interesting conservation related green initiatives that they've been doing, and they've been partnering with us for years on this. And this talk has gone from strength to strength thanks to the bank and their close partnership with us. They support us with this lecture series, the Loris, Varana, Varanam, and even the kids wetland walk. So thank you, Nations Trust Bank. We are indeed humbly obliged to you. We also have a number of corporate partners, and that list has been growing as we go along. So we are indebted to NTB, NDB, Sampath Bank, who's been with us for many, many years and has been the bedrock on which we built this society, if you were to call it that. Ajita Di Costa, we have New Kids on the Block supporting us for the first time now, brand Kumarika, TJ, Brandix, John Keel's Office Automation, Sanjay Lanka, Sparsilon. Colombo Jewelry Stores has been doing some phenomenal work with us over the years, a great partner to have. Aban's worked very closely with us on the Green Isle. Hemas has just started coming in with some interesting work, which you'll hear more about as we go along, and Ceylon Bank. So thank you to all of them, and also CJ and the Sarva team who do a lot of work with us on the creatives. And like I often say, I wish we could enjoy that usual Dilma cup of tea that we get at the BMI stage. But I'm sure many of you will be enjoying a nice cup of tea or coffee at home. Um, of course, this has been one crazy year. Um, we are having some huge battles on the environment, as you know. I mean, today we've been reading about massive project which is you know uh, waste to energy, 15 billion rupees of investment in that project. And when you come to think of it, it's funny how you want a waste to energy project on one side, and you're doing so much at the national level to lay waste this country of ours. And we are being let down by the heads of state, the leaders of this country, the politicians, and a number of the authorities. This year, this country, and last year has been fighting some environmental battles like we've never ever seen before. It's horrendous. And so, my ask from everyone on the call is don't sit this one out, don't sit on the sidelines, fight it out in any way you can contribute, whether it's by dislikes, comments, votes, posts, protests, letters, do what you can. But we need all hands on deck. In our case, we also need financial support. I know we have about 270 members who we'd like to see them paying their subscriptions this year, and many new members who are joining us. Fund us. Some of you can pay online, and we need funds. Some of these are for the legal battles that we are fighting, and the others are to create great awareness on this tragedy which is going on in the country. Like I said, we are being let down by the leaders who don't seem to value what this nation stands for, and it's left to um, civil conscious society, I guess, to fight it out. Right. Um, I think the newspapers have been doing a great job, and we urge the media and other people to keep out the pressure. I mean, we've seen some reports recently. I mean, every natural treasure trove that you can think of, this year alone, whether it's Mudrajavala, Vilpattu, there's been the Reka, our prawn farming clearing. We went to see some of the damage being done in the Hayagala a couple of days ago. Nilgala is under siege, around 50 acres there. Suryakanda, and the list goes on. So, amidst all this madness, it's a pleasure to bring out you know glimmers of hope when we talk about these new discoveries, and we'll have more of that as we go along. Uh, More exciting news, we have an interesting partnership. We are very grateful to the Canadian government, and thanks to the initiatives of the ambassador here, David, and we've started exciting partnership with the Canadian embassy. And so next month's talk, as well as there's an exciting talk on the marine area. We'll be talking of plastic pollution in the marine environment, and that's coming up next week. That's actually supported by Kumarika, and we are going to have Ahmed Afra Ismail, who's co-founder of Zero Waste in Maldives, and he's going to be joined by our very own Dr. Turney, and from Canada, Nicholas Barber, who's a senior advisor of multilateral affairs at Environmental and Climate Change in Canada. So we are bringing you some of the best global stories to kind of complement the work that we can do and should be doing in this beautiful island of ours. Another exciting new step, the WNPS has just decided to launch a brand new subcommittee which is dedicated to the establishment of and furthering work on conservation research. We'd like to strengthen the scientific side of the work we are doing. And so we'd like to call on all young and not so young members who are keen to further the sciences. And you might get more excited after listening to the lecture today, because today this particular topic is drawing a lot on the modern science. And so all those who want to join this new committee on conservation research, please either call the society 071 664 6664, or you can mail us at WNPS, and we'll form that new exciting journey on the science side. We also, of course, as always, inviting all of you to join new members. We have anything from 40, 50, 60 new members joining us. Please download a form, email us, and we'd love to have you as part of this. I don't know whether some of you caught some of the action. We shared a few pictures of all the hard work going on to renovate the WNPS bungalow in Yala, and so that's a big effort, which is hopefully due to complete sometime late March, for which we also need quite a bit more of support in terms of funds and this and that. So please do help out. I know many of us grew up going to that bungalow, right? The Duvalaway bungalow as well badly needs patronage, because we don't have too much of travel because of COVID. So we have some very, very affordable rates. And please do call if you'd like to spend some time at the Duvalaway bungalow. We also have two messages from our different subcommittees. The CAT subcommittee is looking for some new members to strengthen their team. Anybody who wants to get their feet wet and hands a little bit dirty and up close and personal, we're looking for some volunteers to work for 1 or 2 weekends on the Green Isle project in Athidia. So that's close to Colombo, as you know. We're going to be doing some tree planting. So you can call and give your name if we need 15 or 20 volunteers for that, and there'll be 1 or 2 ecologists on ground. And so we'll be doing some tree planting there very soon. And I know a number of you might like to understand firsthand what it means to be engaged in physically in a project. So come join us in Athidia. That project, as we mentioned earlier, is sponsored by Abans. We also are looking for maybe some people with a big heart, right? We are looking for, there's a bit of a drought all over, and some of the plants and seedlings that we put as part of reforesting that entire project in the wetlands there needs to be we need to pump water into those spaces. So we need some portable kerosene pumps, cost about $50,000. So anybody who wants to donate that, or for the auger to dig some holes for the planting, that's another about $30,000. So people can help us in many ways. And finally, also on a more slightly humorous note, the work that we have been doing has resulted in the crocs coming back into that area. So we've seen them nesting, as well as we've seen quite a few crocs in that area. But the downside is that it becomes a bit of a problem when our paddle boat goes out there into the area. So we might have to upgrade to a small 10 horsepower boat. Anybody who's keen or has some connections with people who can help us get something at an economical rate there, please do come forward. Right. Okay, so now let's get on with bringing Dr. Sampath up, right? And let's set this camera up, guys. So in the meantime, let me talk. This is like home and home because, as many of you know, Dr. Sampath is on the general committee of the WNPS, so he works very closely with us. And so we're really proud to have him. So this is like talking to a friend or talking at one of our meetings. But friendships aside, we are, in the company of some royalty here, right? I remember reading about Deepal's discovery. I think maybe I think early 2000, 2001 or something, Sampath, if I'm not mistaken. And there was all these articles saying we discovered a bird after, I think it was 132 years or something like that. And you know the birding community was going nuts, and we were all really excited and proud. Since then, if I'm not mistaken, I think number 33 was when we split out the Ceylon wood shrike or something like that, if my memory serves me correct. But to find one person associated with 34 and now one more, that's something special. So we are in the company of somebody very, very special, who's leading from the front, bringing the latest of modern science into this wonderful country of ours. So Dr. Sampath is, he's a research scientist who specializes in the study of evolution. I mean, some of you may have heard that wonderful talk that Dr. Sampath did some time back. We had some great insights from him. So he's been very keen on the study of the evolution, molecular ecology, and ontology. His lab, Avian Evolution Node, studies how animals evolve in isolation in an island biography framework, using both fieldwork and lab work. So you're going to see a lot of and hear a lot of what's the inside story behind unraveling these birds, these new species, and all of that, right? So his research programs span across the oceans, islands, forests. When we sometimes have our lectures, sometimes somebody dials in from all odd places in Sri Lanka and he says, "Yeah, I'm in the field today." So he's been doing great work all over Sri Lanka, studying stuff in the Western Ghats, and he's been studying a lot of the bird migration, the Central Asian flyway. Sampath is a birder, he's a painter, naturalist, a conservationist. Um, he's also a very nice guy. So that's sometimes, really fascinating to be around. Had the pleasure of being out with him in the field, and it's amazing. So he's a walking encyclopedia. He's a senior lecturer attached to the Department of Zoology and Environmental Sciences at the University of Colombo. He's, like I said, on the WNPS General Committee, and I know Sampath is also leading the FOG, Sampath, if I'm not mistaken. So another great group of birders there. So Sampath, let's hand the mic over to you for an enthralling session, which I know we've already have large numbers dialed in, ready to hear you. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Shriyan, for that lavish description. I'll just try to get my screen going. Yeah, it's more like a home and home kind of thing. I've tried to get my let me see my video. A second. Here we go. Show video panel and right on. I guess people can see my screen. Shriyan, you guys can see me and my screen.
You're good.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Shriyan, again for that description. And it's been great working with WNPS, one of the oldest conservation organizations, and also I've been a member of many environment-related groups, organizations, WhatsApp groups. But something very special about WNPS is you guys always put that conservation, the sea, into the forefront. There was some discussions a few years ago by some visiting scholars here that whether research should come first or the conservation should come first. And general agreement now in globally is that the conservation should come first. Research, understanding would come naturally with conservation. When you are stuck in a small island, I think that effect of that is actually even more because you have very little, few resources, few land, and growing populations, growing expectations, dreams, and awareness, and also growing greed. So the greed and lack of awareness about our surroundings and what we could use and what is the thresholds of consumption is it's a huge battle. So I'm happy that I'm also part of this movement now to try to at least slow down that the vicious devil of human greed. Anyway, with that, I will start a slightly a different story. When I first gave the title, I wasn't sure what I would talk about. And I started putting together a set of slides. And so slowly it evolved into, I wanted to talk about the importance of new tools, importance of using the full arsenal available in the modern science for understanding the nature. Through that understanding, we could create awareness. In a democracy, we need people to understand and support nature, animals, because they don't have a vote. We can see that when you have discussions in villages, when you have discussions in the parliament, the vote is a main factor. Unfortunately, natural resources that sustain life in this planet, that sustain life in the country, that sustain clean water for people and animals, that sustain oxygen and clean air for animals and people, that sustain land, lush, green, arable land, that sustain life, don't have vote. The vote is there only with people. For most, national heritage, national treasures, national heroes are all people. But this country is not just people. This country has about over 1 million animals and plants and waterfalls and pools and rivers and oceans, deep oceans, shallow coral reefs. This country has mountains, clouds, rain, monsoon rain, that comes from the north, from the main continent, and also from the south, from one of the larger oceans in the planet. And this country has so much natural elements that also part of this country. So one journalist 2 days ago asked me, like, what do you mean by national identity? I asked her, what you mean by national identity? And she said, it's our identity of people. I said, is it? Is a nation consisted of only people? Is the nation consisted of only few rundown politicians? Because we know that all national heroes for some reason came from mostly from politicians. And if you go into their lives, who knows what you would see. So to me, Sri Lanka, our island, is full of life, full of natural resources, full of beautiful places, full of very important ecosystems. And among that, there are odd one animal that kind of disrupts the entire thing, which I kind of have very little regard. Anyway, so with that, I'm thrive. I'm my life's goal is to understand more about that element, the elements that we call life on this planet and this country in this case, and how we use our knowledge of science and understanding to understand more about this. So with that, I will use 2 case studies, woodpeckers and plovers. to illustrate some of the new techniques, some of the avenues that we've taken in the recent past to understand more about the avifauna, the birds of this country. I'm always getting these notifications of people coming into Pavitra. If you can kind of divert that from my screen, it comes onto my screen all the time. All right. Anyway, thank you very much again for joining. Why I can't share? Okay. So bird field guides. I thought to start from field guides because field guides are numerous now. Lots of field guides are coming, all sizes, all shapes, all depths. Some are shallow, some are meant for general audience, some are very specialized, meant for like more critical users. So what do they show us? What you would see in a field guide? This is an example of an old school, old field guide, about 40 to 50-year-old field guide. It's a Thai field guide, and you can see that in, need a second, I'll get my laser pointer. Okay. So you can see that one of the birds that we are talking today, the Kentish plover, is depicted here. One male and one female of the, one male in the winter plumage and in the breeding plumage. That's all. And the more sophisticated modern field guides. This is Rasmussen, probably the best field guide of in our region because it is actually a critical analysis on museum and actual specimens. So, and it shows the same species here, number 12 Kentish plover, and it shows a breeding male, breeding male, two males in breeding, and then breeding male and a non-breeding bird, just two individuals, and then some fancy illustrations of other species. Another example, again relevant to what we are talking about today, woodpeckers, flamebacks, Asian flamebacks. This is 1975, 45-year-old book. Ben King, one of the pioneers of field guides in Asia. So it's a very kind of static illustrations with field marks illustrated clearly. And in the same light, Grimmett et al., 2011, more sophisticated new book, shows a much cleaner, much nicer illustrations. But again, it shows one individual or two individuals of the species. What we see that, though, is our national identity there. Like if you look at this page, to me, this shows our national identity. This shows the endemicity, the uniqueness of Sri Lanka, whereas you can see the Asian forms have yellow coloration, and then the Sri Lankan ones are red. Only Sri Lankan ones actually has this red color according to this, the Sri Lankan subspecies in this case, and a Sri Lankan species. So it is our identity. How that identity is produced? It's Sri Lanka is an island, and this beautiful image actually shows us and the towering Himalayas in the background, and then the Indian plain with the mountains of Western Ghats, and then the Raj Mahal, and then the Satpura range here, and then the Ganga goes across the valley, and then the Himalaya. So the Ganga basically prevent some of the stuff coming into the Satpura range, and then here in this Palghat Gap, where the Kaveri River actually prevents some elements to cross to the southern tip, and then the Pork Strait prevents some elements to come into Sri Lanka. But that is only part of the story. All these creates endemics or endemism, an animal or plant form restricted to a single political or geographic entity. And I think nowadays, endemism being discussed in the public arena, in the limelight, with the unfortunate incident of Crudia selenica and its and its related politics. But the bird endemism has been fairly well understood and been recognized as one of the key flagships elements of Sri Lankan biodiversity heritage. For example, this is grey hornbill. It's called Oceras gingalensis. Oceras is the long curved beak bird. Gingalensis is the from the Ginganga area. So initially this bird was described along the Ginganga headwaters of Ginganga in southern province in 1700. So it's interesting that the Gingalensis actually represent Ginganga. With or without Ginganga, in the years to come, the name of the Ginganga would stay. Right. Endemism is an island populations emerges through environmental, geographic, and cultural isolation. Environmental isolation is that the Sri Lanka, for example, being very green and climatically different. Geographic isolation means that it's geographically isolated from the mainland, and then the cultural isolation means that each animal, each plant, each life form has its own culture. They have their ways of selecting mates. They have their ways of discriminating others. So that is their culture. So the island populations has different cultures compared to mainland. So Sri Lanka is a continental island, and it has a very interesting climate. One of the wettest islands in the planet. The wet zone of Sri Lanka is very wet. It's in certain places much wetter than Amazon, much wetter than the African rainforest and the Bornean and Eastern Asian rainforest. So it is clearly better than Indian rainforest. So it is one of the most wettest, one of the wettest places in the planet, in the tropical planet. So it's a very unique place, as you can see, and that creates a unique kind of a green bubble within a larger, like a landscape of relatively dry Indian subcontinent. And this together with the central highlands and the mountains and then the ocean creates a very dynamic, rich environment. This environment actually has affinities to the Gondwana, great continent of the south. We were nestled over here with Africa, South America, Antarctica, Australia, and Africa and India. And then over the past 200 million, 250 million year period, we moved north and met the great northern continent, Laurasia. No other island, no other landmass in the planet had traveled this much. Over, if I'm correct, over, I think, 4,000 kilometers, we moved over a span of 150 million years. So together, India and Sri Lanka, we traveled, we were a subantarctic landmass, especially Sri Lanka was a subantarctic island about 150 million years ago, and now we are a tropical island in the northern hemisphere. We were in the southern hemisphere, deep down in the southern hemisphere. So, and in the process created the Himalayas. Himalayas is very young mountain range. The mountains that we see in this photograph from Vikramasinghe Mendisaya's this classic photograph of the mountains. These mountains are much older than Himalayas. These are over 200, 300 million year old mountains, where Himalayas is about 50 million years. So we have much older mountains in our system. And some plants are northern of Laurasian, like this plant. And then if you see a horned lizard, like a Ceratophora in here, that is from the southern Gondwanan continent. So this is a really fascinating place, a one-of-a-kind place in the planet, where we cleared for potato farms for short-term gains. Sri Lanka and fauna, it's represented 5% of the global 10,000 or 11,000 species of birds. We have about 500, 450 to 500, depending on whom you're talking to. We have about 220 residents, about 250 migrants. Resident bird is a bird that breeds and lives year-round. Migrant is a bird that lives 6 months here and not breed here, but go somewhere else for breeding. And then we have about 34 endemics. On top of that, we have about 1/3 of our breeding residents are a form of our own endemics. That is one of the key elements that I'm going to talk about. So the endemicity or the percentage endemic, some in the region, we are the grand champions. We have about 460 to 500 species. We have 34 endemics. India is much larger, about 1,300 to 1,350 species, and they have 42 endemics. So these numbers are proportional to, here the proportional to the size of the country, here the proportional to the species, and you can see that our percentage endemism is much higher. Why? Because we are an island. Isolation of geology, isolation of environment or climate, and isolation of culture as a result created this. I'll talk about it later. So the endemics, though, the numbers has been changing over the past 250 to 300 years. I've here put guns and binos. I don't know whether most people realize that up until Phillips, the birding in the world, in this context, Sri Lanka, is done through a shotgun, a trap gun, a bird gun, mostly a single barrel trap gun where either you muzzle load it, you load it with the pump action, or you have the side loading, and basically you shoot, and then you get the skin and study it, and that is how you identify birds. So the initial descriptions, so these are the number of species that described by this particular authors. So Templeton, Layard, they are the earlier ones. Layard done a good job in terms of documenting fairly good proportion of birds. And then Holsworth, a very important person in our recent studies, because Holsworth's collections in British Museum and in American Museum of Natural History has been heavily used for some of the aspects that I will talk about later. And then the Vincent Legg, probably the greatest ornithologist that lived in Sri Lanka, he managed to get into most of the birds. And to me, why it stopped below 400, partly because those are the species that you can shoot. The ones that cannot be shot are the ones that left behind. But the interesting thing about Legg is that he was very methodical and meticulous. He managed to identify 47 endemics. And later it was downgraded to 20s up until Vijay Singh saying 26, and then the Rasmussen and Anderton. Again, Rasmussen, being a very critical and a very careful scientist, actually went into the right direction of studying specimens rather than just wandering around with a binocular. Managed to identify about 10 more species as endemics. And Vijay Singh onward, Phillips started the transition, I think, uses different tool, the optics. And the advent of optics actually gave more species and more knowledge and more endemics. Zoothera imbricata, for example, the Sri Lanka thrush or scaly thrush or white thrush, depending on whom you're talking to, is kind of left in this 33 so that when you put that in, it becomes 34. And all this, I think, advent of new techniques and tools would eventually, I think, going towards where the birdie is showing the number. So like the parrot picking the number, I think 47 Legg actually kind of leading us the direction where what would be the kind of the final-ish number of endemics of this country. Right now we are at 34, 35. Hopefully for all my students do their job in time, 36 or 37. But they are not doing. When they leave the country for their PhDs, they just abandoned me and our research programs. And that led to some of the results sitting in our labs drawers. Right. Let's talk about something that we've done using new tools. Tools that Phillips and the earlier explorers, the shotgun and the bino people haven't had. some of the new tools that we use and the luxury of that actually gives us new insights. I will tell you two stories, one on the discovery of the red Black Woodpecker as a new species, and the other one on the Hanuman plover as a new species, as examples. And this is not just me. I'm being the kind of the mastermind or the kind of the leader. I driven by passion and the love for nature and wild places, and host of students, collaborators, institutes that believe in me, supported these activities. Some of these ladies are undergraduates who done different aspects of flameback studies. Darren Irwin is a prof at UBC. He's one of my postdoctoral supervisors, a person who studied extensively on Philoscopus greenish warblers. And then Saminda Fernando now has his doctorate. He did his PhD on these guys. And now Rashika Ranasinghe, another PhD student, now working on some other aspects. Basically starting from where Saminda had stopped. So we are doing this as a collaborative study with UBC and University of Colombo, my lab at the University of Colombo, and my research kind of body, the alien evolution node. There are other people involved. I will show them later. So let's talk about woodpeckers. The woodpeckers are Asian endemics. This particular group, the flamebacks, are Asian endemics. They are very colorful, one of the most colorful birds in Asia. People don't realize that how colorful they are, and how, like, especially in Sri Lankan ones, how red they are. They are just kind of painted red birds. If you looked at most field guides that have been published in Asia, one of these flamebacks are on the cover page. And when we were talking about, whenever we talk about in any international forum about them, like, I can see like glowing eyes of global scholars, and the amount of response that I get from like bird experts around the world on these guys are really amazing. So the woodpeckers are really truly Asian, truly colorful, truly kind of interesting group. And it's even more interesting because in two islands they are red, everywhere else they are yellow. The two islands happen to be some of the islands in Philippine archipelago and Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, two independent lineages, the birds from the greater flameback lineage, the Chrysocoleptus, and the birds from lesser flameback lineage, the Dinopium, they both come and become red. In the Philippines, only the Chrysocoleptus lineage has the red individuals, Dinopium represented by yellow. So Sri Lanka has something very special because our common woodpecker is red. Everywhere else in Asia, it's yellow. So Sri Lanka, as I said, two independent lineages came and become red. Something in our water that make them red, isn't it? So in this particular talk, I'm focusing on the lesser flameback group in Sri Lanka. This is mostly done by Saminda Fernando with myself and Darren, and then Kalpani and Purnima and Shanika. They worked on this system as undergrads, and then now Rashika is working as a postgraduate student. And then this is one of my pet areas as well. So I've been working on this system for past nearly now 12 to 13 years. So the interesting thing about this system, we have yellow ones in India and northern Sri Lanka, and then we have orangish ones in the middle, and then we have the red ones. But they were all considered subspecies when we first started. So what we've done with Saminda, Saminda done extensive studies in museums across in India and in US. In Smithsonian, Trivandrampuram, and then the Sri Lankan National Collection. Some of the specimens from the Canadian collections went into the analysis, and then in the wild we've done misnetting and extensive analysis. We don't use guns. We use binoculars, but our main target is to use mist nets and catch safely these few individuals, and then get a sample of blood and then release them back. So that way, it is very harmless activity, but gives good results. So what this is what Saminda found. Actually, we traveled a lot. So the green is the yellow, just to make it kind of clear. So the yellow birds are in the north and in Mannar, and then the orange, the intermediate ones are in the middle, and then you have the red ones. All these are capture locations, and this is the genetic variation. The northern ones have a northern mitochondria, southern ones have southern mitochondria, and then in between you have the mixture of southern and northern mitochondria from Putlam to Kilinochchi, if you draw a line. Plumage also shows the same. The in between that area is a mixture. Some people right away jump into the conclusion that this is hybrid zone. We were careful. We take time because there were some. We had some competition. Some rogue foreign American individual was invited by some of our friends in Sri Lanka when we started working. Came from Hawaii, retired prof, with some people and some lot of dollars, I think, and try to kind of overtake or basically sabotage what we were doing for a while. But they were in a rush, so they got here and there information and tried to publish. But we took time, and we managed to show that the true nature of this hybrid zone. It took time, but I thought we've done a good job. So what we found, body size and body shape, they are not much different. This is all flamebacks. Color-wise also, when you looked across Asia, they are overlapping. But within the island, genetically, they are very different. The red ones are has its own genetic identity. Green ones or the yellow ones have their own identity. Within the island, phylogenetically, our red ones are separated well. Within the island, the color is very well separated, and then the orange ones have intermediate nature. And based on this, we managed to describe the subspecies of Dinopium bengalens in Sri Lanka, Dinopium bengalens sarodus, into a full species Dinopium sarodus, the red-backed flameback or lesser Sri Lanka flameback in 2016. And that is probably the first time a kind of a detailed scientific study led to a description of a species in the modern context. In the molecular, we use integrative taxonomy, we use molecular tools, vocalization, we used the body measurements, color, spectrometric analysis, and so on. So the application of integrated taxonomy in birds, I think first time used in Sri Lanka in this particular description of this new species. That was in 2016. But we went more, like Saminda had an interesting chapter in his thesis. We looked at the pairing. The south of this line, Putlam and south, is red. So it all red birds, and red birds finding red mates. And north of Jaffna, north of Mannar and this Kilinochchi line, the yellow birds finding yellow mates. But in between this line, Kilinochchi Mannar line, and then the Putlam Trinco line, you have a complex pairing. Males and females, we play back and looked. Saminda spent a fair bit of time there. And he studied through 304 pairs and their compositions. What he found is that red ones prefer red, yellow ones goes with yellow. But when the opportunity gives, the yellow girls, in this case the woodpecker girls, yellow girls prefer red boys over yellow boys when they have the option. Red boys are more aggressive over yellow boys. As a result, the red boys are heading north now, kind of pushing the yellow ones further into the north. And yellow girls like red boys, so more mating take place when the opportunity is given towards red boys. So that is an interesting thing. So it looks like a moving hybrid zone, but what we've shown is that the hybrids are inferior. the vigor or the genetic, the fitness of hybrids are low. So even though hybridization is there, it collapses. So hybrids collapsing and giving way to the parental types. For undergraduate work, Rashika, for her undergraduate studies about a few years ago, wanted to know the biochemistry of this. So we looked at the feather color, and what we found is quite exciting. That we found a separate endemic pigment, carotenoid pigment, in these red birds in their back and in the main contour feathers, where that red pigment actually absorbed the reflection of yellow and making these birds red. So now Rashika is doing her PhD on this system in the deeper genetics, genomics, and the biochemistry of this system. So through that, we know that not just the bird got endemic, but the biochemistry, the pigments also got had changed in an interesting way that led to like endemic pigments to develop in the island. Right. So the woodpecker, now a full species, was a subspecies, an endemic subspecies, very distinctive in color, red-colored bird. So when you look into the endemic subspecies, it's an interesting thing because subspecies are a kind of part of like populations that consisted of the species, and among animal groups, birds have the highest number of subspecies per taxa, about 4.2% for each bird. There's about 4.2%, not percent, 4.2 subspecies are found. For example, this is the Indian paradise flycatcher. Both individuals are from the same species, but this is Ceylonensis, the one found in Sri Lanka, the red siuruhura, and this is the Indian paradise flycatcher, the paradisi, which is subspecies, which is the migratory one, Suduredihura. But they both are within the same species. And the subspecies are normally defined using a few, one or two morphological character, can be plumage, can be size, can be a call, can be, and they are normally isolated in a loosely isolated in an island or a setting like that. So and that kind of prevent them mixing with the rest of the population, and small changes started to come. Normally, subspecies are viewed as a kind of first step towards speciation. An extreme case of this is the yellow wagtail complex, where the yellow wagtail, the Monticella flava, is actually has about 13, actually more subspecies in its range, and each this, as you can see in the northern boreal region, there's all kinds of subspecies with identifiable morphological plumage characters, and then intermediate forms also are there, and then undescribed or unknown areas are there as well. So like these days we are interested in this yellow wagtail complex as well. We started to do some genetic work, and we done some work recently with Gary Alport, a scientist now living in Sri Lanka, and we are continuing that work. So to understand what kind of birds come into Sri Lanka. Anyway, so the subspecies is an interesting thing because they have distinctive characters. So that could give us some interesting kind of cues about endemicity of our country. Especially, Sri Lanka has about 80 unique subspecies among the 220 or so resident breeders in the island. So that is about 1/3 of our avifauna, very high for global numbers. The highest is 58% in Philippines, but we are also there, like 30% or so. So it's kind of very interesting that it has not been acknowledged in the previous by the previous authors. So the very high endemic subspecies actually leading and giving cues about the forces of isolation of this country. And when you look into we've done some kind of superficial analysis on base using the national collection at the National Museum, Colombo. National Museum been very helpful in terms of studies of biogeography and evolution. So what we see is that the body size started to get smaller when you move from north to south, from Asia to mainland Asia, South India to Sri Lanka. Plumage getting darker, the beaks getting longer, tails seems like getting shorter, and then the overall plumage getting more uniform as opposed to speckled. The reasons are again isolation, the cultural changes in sexual selection related changes, and especially the very wet climate making Sri Lankan birds tend to have more melanin pigments in the system. As a result, like the crows are darker here, the miners are darker here, the kahibellas are darker, you woodpeckers are darker. Most species are dark here because the melanin can stay more longer because the humidity is higher, so melanin is more stable. That's why we are dark as well compared to our North Indian cousins. We are darker, so we consume more whitening cream. Partly because it's not because we are tropical, not because we have more sun. It's that our environment is more humid, so it supports the formation of stability of melanin. Right, in this subspecies complex. So we were now interested in subspecies. We are now interested in subspecies to understand what is happening in Sri Lanka. An example of this system, of such system, is this Kentish plover system, where it used to be about 6 subspecies: Charadrius Alexandrinus, Charadrius Alexandrinus delbatus, Alexandrinus bohemi, and Alexandrinus mimosus. And then over time, it has been splitted into full species. This is an interesting thing. Even though it's called Kentish plover, it's not found in Kent. Its scientific name actually better represented by the Alexandria, because Alexandrinus is the Alexandria. So this is where it was found, first described, a plover from Alexandria. But for some reason, somebody named it as Kentish plover, and ever since then we are claiming it Kentish. So anyway, so we were interested in our resident population, the sea bohemi population. Kentish plover is an interesting one, where they found across the globe. It's a very small plover. It has its own kind of a food niche, or it uses a very specialized kind of a feeding window in the wetland ecosystems. And its breeding is very interesting. Once upon a time, one of my students, Shashi Prabha Jayasinghe, together we looked at the development of the embryo using a probe. We didn't poke the egg, we just use an external probe to understand the temperature variations. The Kentish plover doesn't regulate. So to breed, Kentish plover needs stable temperatures, like relatively stable temperature-wise sandy substrate. So, for example, Mannar provides that exact situation where it doesn't go beyond 36 and it doesn't go drop beyond 30 when we do measurements, as opposed to Valley Park or Naval Valley Park. In the middle of the day, the temperature goes 52, 55, sometimes even 60 degrees. And then at night, it goes sometimes down to 23 degrees. Lapwings can withstand that variation because they guard the eggs, and they intensely careful about the temperature of the egg. So they do all kinds of things to keep that. Kentish plovers don't do that. So they depend on natural substrate that actually regulates. So anyway, so that's a side story. So what we were interested in sea bohemi, or our Sri Lankan subspecies, is its ecology and evolution. This is eBird maps, bit cluttered because it has the migratory Alexandrinus subspecies coming in, and the resident Alexandrinus bohemi in the coastline. But you can see that it's primarily a coastal species, and its strongholds being Chilau area, Putlam, and Mannar, Jaffna, and then Hambantota in Sri Lanka, and also it found in the coastal belt of India. For this particular study, Jude Janit Niroshan, one of my undergrads last year, undergraduate students. Most of my undergrads, I normally find them in in first year of their undergraduate program, because some people just come and they wanted to work with birds or work with me, and then they just started to involve in various programs that we do. And so Jude is somebody like that, very passionate. For a while I thought he's a journalist because he's very good at writing, and later I realized that he's not a journalist, he's actually an undergrad. So Jude done some amazing work. So we had a good collaboration with Sun Yat-sen University, Professor Yang Liu. Through his collaboration, we had a whole set of samples, information, data came from the Dale-Bartus and Alexandrinus system in Eastern Asia. And then we, through another collaboration of Dr. Alex Bond, one of my long-term friends, he's now the head curator at the British Museum and bird collection. And so we did our PhDs together at once upon a time. So through that we collected we've done looked into carefully the British and European collections and some of the American collections. And then we've done extensive field work. Total samples 937, not just from Sri Lanka, majority of those from China, but we never handled samples. We got the data from other researchers. And in Sri Lanka, we had a whole assortment of sampling sites and study sites. As you can see, Jude and I been kind of baking in the sun in Mannar. A lot of arguments, debating how to do, what not to do, what to do. And then we banned them. We studied the eggs, the plovers, and then we had a host of morphometrics, plumage characters, and then we looked at the blood and their movement, their range, size, and all, how they interact with the Alexandrinus subspecies. So we looked at all these over a span of about a year. And then we banned them and we observed them. Jude spent weeks at time following these individuals. It's quite rewarding, very interesting work. And then when we compare those with the C. boehmii, Alexandrinus, and Dale-Bartus, these are the three different subspecies that we critically evaluated. Dale-Bartus is a full species now. You can see that the C. boehmii is different. It has a different wing length compared to other two. It has a different phylogenetic history. C. boehmii is kind of basal to Alexandrinus and Dale-Bartus. Dale-Bartus is a full species. Alexandrinus is a subspecies. So as C. boehmii. So C. boehmii is actually older, and it is it diverged about 1.1 million years ago from the Dale-Bartus and Alexandrinus system. So we started to see a kind of evidence of a unique evolutionary entity. And then we had microsatellite markers, about 15 microsatellite markers. We compare that with Chinese birds, northern Chinese birds, southern Chinese birds, and Sri Lankan birds, Indian birds. And what we've seen that our birds, the Sri Lankan breeding population is unique. They have a specific genetic structure that is quite unique. All these red bars are our birds, and then the mixture of birds, and then you have the Dale-Bartus coming here. Similarly, Jude and Professor Yang and ourselves, we've looked at the genetic segregation, and the red dots are our birds. Our birds are very highly segregated. They are not subspecies at this stage because there's very little genetic mixing, very little interbreeding, and they are actually further away from another known species, which is the Charadrius Dale-Bartus, the white-faced plover of Asia. So based on that, we described this new bird. We are working on the publication is in review as Hanuman plover. Jude is our, the man there, and then Gayomini Panagoda, another PhD student of mine, who's a rare find. I think probably I have very few bird students in my lab. She's one of the leaders of birding in the lab. And Professor Yang and Sunset University, Palmyra House, and Vayo, Mr. Nyanam and his team, they are supported us and supporting us throughout the time financially, and also other means to work in Mannar. It's a tough place, and we have Udaya Karunaratne, Ajit Ratnayaka. They are all not just friends, they are colleagues and also our donors and providers. So it's a nice team, and then international partners as well. Wildlife department and forest department involved in all these studies. The name Hanuman. So when we realized that our plover is a full species, we wanted to not to do that historical blunder twice, because in Hanuman plover's range, it was called Adam's Bridge, which is ridiculous, because it is the Rama's bridge, or Nala Setu or Rama Setu. That was the name that given for millennia. And then one random moment, it was called Adam's Bridge, and ever since then, the Kalusuddas us saying it's Adam's Bridge. And it had happened before in the Kentish plover, where this Alexandrian plover been named as called Kentish plover by somebody, and it's been called Kentish plover ever since. So to correct that two historical errors, we thought to go for the local people and to see what they believe, and to reflect the local stories in this beautiful small creature. So what we found is that the most of our work done in the Rama's Bridge and the Mannar Island. So it is the Rama's Bridge, and the story is that the Lord God Rama asked the Lord Hanuman to create this bridge so that they could cross. And the Lord Hanuman is known for love, compassion, devotion, strength, and intelligence, which we represent in the. And we wanted to have more in our leaders. We wanted to have more in our environmental fraternity of these traits. So it represents well what our shared interest and passion. So, and Hanuman is the most widely worshipped deities in Hinduism. So, and to reflect those stories, especially the Rama's bridge, we really don't want to use the Adam's Bridge in any of our communication. So to highlight all this, we thought to call this bird the Hanuman plover, to represent the stories of the land and the stories of the people of that land in this beautiful bird. So Hanuman Upakotti in Tamil, Hanuman Olivia in Sinhalese, and Hanuman plover. The scientific name, we are waiting for the publication to be out. It has been debated several times with different skins, because this species or this subspecies or this form has been extensively collected and represented in global museums. So we had the ability to go to these places and study those, and now we have very good understanding of how the historical name had been changed, and now it is kind of, we know the name, but we'll wait the publication to tell that. I don't have the authority to disclose it before the publication. So these are some of the snapshots of the Hanuman plover's life cycle. These are eggs. As you can see, the eggs are semi-buried. So they semi-bury these eggs for protection and also for thermoregulation. And the chicks are tiny. You can see this donkey poop, donkey dung, and these tiny babies also mimicking the donkey dung. Only thing this donkey dung piece can have a small squeaky call, and also it is very cunning. Where if you go closer, it will kind of actually freeze and stay just like a donkey poo. These guys are highly vulnerable. They follow the mother for a few weeks. They stay about 3 weeks on ground like this without any protection. And these mothers and fathers are helpless. So dogs, stray dogs making a havoc in the Rama's Bridge National Park and in Mannar in all over Sri Lanka in the wetland ecosystems. People drive, fishermen go there, they just step on this accidentally. And in one occasion, we've seen two small kids in Mannar basically step on the entire, one area of Littleton colony, and they intentionally went and step on basically all the eggs. just for fun, because when you step on an egg, it pops, right? So anyway, something like that. So there's a lot of injustice for these birds, tiny creatures. But they survive. They have been survived, and these tiny babies run around and eventually become adults, and they live year round in India, southernmost tip of India, especially the eastern side of it, in the Pork Bay and in Sri Lanka. And the male Hanuman plover and female Hanuman plover, they are very drab in color. It's funny that some of the European collections have them labeled as subadults or juveniles. Accidentally, I think they thought they were washed off or some, like, sub-adult birds, but they are adults. A lot of people ask me, like, well, how do you identify a Kentish plover from a Hanuman plover? It's easy when in the breeding season, when you have males, and breeding season is easy in another reason, because the migratory Kentish plover is not there. In other occasions, they are very drab. They are almost like the smaller version of lesser sand plover. Actually, historically, they were called little sand plovers in the 1700s. We were thinking about that name as well, but I think Hanuman plover is much nicer, closer to our hearts. So the males are, yes, easy to identify. They have this black stripe and semi-developed frontal lobe, and slight kind of washed kind of chestnutty kind of head, not like the Kentish plovers, nice black stripes and a nice thing. And you can see that these are like so they don't have that sunglass kind of appearance that you see in Kentish plover, partly because they are smaller in size and they are resident, so they are not they are more kind of casual in terms of their food preference probably, and also the utilization of the landscape, because they don't fly long distances. Females look similar, but the Hanuman plover has paler legs and also smaller body size and much more washed out type plumage. Males in non-breeding, more like the females, but you can still see a little bit of the facial markings slightly better than what you see in the females. So overall, it's a relatively similar looking bird, but the males lost its sexual dimorphism in Sri Lankan context, which is interesting because in islands sometimes sexual dimorphism get reduced. If you watch Korean soap operas, you know what I mean. And then also, but genetically they are very different. Right, that's my last slide. So what do field guides show us? Field guides show us the normal type or the model. It shows only few individuals, in most cases one or two individuals. In rare cases like changeable hawk eagle or some forms of petrels, it shows slightly more individuals, maybe 3 or 4, but it always shows an average, a form that is kind of average for that particular population. If you wanted to do a careful, deep analysis, if you wanted to see beyond these painted illustrations, or if you wanted to see beyond these photographs, or beyond this normal, or beyond this kind of generalization, you need time, you need to go to the wilderness, you need to go beyond the field guide. I encourage my students to not to use field guides, but to have their own illustrations and own notes, because bird guides would make you put your observations into pigeonholes and prevent you thinking more. But critical analysis and spending time in the field, spending time in the lab, using new tools and learning about them and experimenting and using the collections in the national collection, and if you have the luxury, the foreign collections, they are treasure troves. That will give you the knowledge beyond what you see in the field guides. As I mentioned earlier, I'm fortunate to have a team like Pirisa, having a team around. I always blessed by having very good, like-minded students and colleagues and teachers around and then good-hearted people who's willing to spend some of their resources on this work. So I have to mention, Professor Yang, Professor Darren Irwin, and then the Biodiversity Research Center, where I did a postdoc there once upon a time, and then my lab at the Molecular Ecology and Evolution Lab at the Department of Zoology, and then an evolution node, which kind of binds everything in my mind. And then the Jude, Saminder, Rashika, Kalpani, Gayamini, and Sanjay, I haven't mentioned any of their work. It's kind of falls out of the scope. Nelum recently finished her PhD. She's the one who studied the white eye complex in India and Sri Lanka. And then the lab at the university. And then the wildlife department and forest department, few private sector parties, government sector. This is a collaboration. Anyway, with that, thank you very much. I wanted to insist the fact that science is needed. Through science, we can understand our world around better, and it's powerful. It's not subjected, it's more objective. So the information coming out is, I think, more believable and testable. So with that, I will stop. Thank you very much, WNPS and Nations Trust Bank, and all the people who run around to make this happen. And over to you, Sriyan.
Thank you, Sampath. Let's first see if we are allowed back on. Okay, I hope you can see my screen. So yeah, we have a few questions and lots of interesting things. So let me jump straight into it. I mean, firstly, I recall when we were walking on that, once with you on one of the first islands of Adams Bridge. There were a number of dogs, and you were talking about that, right? So, talk to us a little bit around the implications of some of this kind of behavior where people just think that they can encroach or move into these areas and take these regular behavioral habits. Also, just touch a little bit around what happens when the tides and the waters, how do they impact these nests? If the nesting, does it get flooded, or is it always above water area?
Yeah, first I will talk about the impact of dogs and cats. The problem is that they are specialized predators. People don't understand how good at killing animals. These guys. So the dogs, especially, they can travel long distances in packs, and they can when they hunt few nests and adults, they become specialists of it. And then they are very smart. Like any dog owner would know. I'm a dog owner and a big dog lover, and I know how intelligent they are. They are almost කර කියන්නේ කතා කරන්න බෑ එක විතරයි. ඒකත් පුළුවන් ඉතින්. My dog can talk well actually. I think the point is, so when they realize how to find nest, a bird's brain is nothing compared to a dog's brain. So they just go and sniff out nest and chicks and adults. That's one. And then when they are not there, we feed them and we sustain the predator so that the predator can go and do another kill. So that's the problem. Like in any other natural system, if the prey getting rarer, the predator also either moved away or died. So the system get stabilized. In dogs and cats, we feed them and we sustain the predator so that the predator can do more killing. So last week we were in Mannar in the wildlife office. There was a cat, and we were shocked to see that. And then the cat caught a gerbil that night. So we took photos and we showed that to the wildlife range, and he was good enough to kind of find another home for the cat and kind of get rid of the cat. That is in the Bankale. so anyway, so that it's sad to see how much damage that these guys do.
Well, I guess if you thought that was bad enough, very soon we might have a gun in every farmer's hand in this country. If you own an acre of land, you'll be soon picking up a gun. So if you thought having a dog was bad enough, you're going to have an entire country running around with guns, unleashing God knows what. So let's hope sanity will prevail. Let's talk a little bit more about the birds. So talk to us around the areas that the bird generally occupies. Are there particular seasons for, I'm just picking pieces of different questions. Are there particular seasons for actually seeing these birds, and the banding on the legs, do they have any impact on the health of the birds?
I see. I'll start with the season. I mean, since these guys are, by the way, they are endemic to South India and Sri Lanka, right? So they are endemic to the Pork Bay region of South India and Sri Lanka, and in Sri Lanka around Hambantota district and along the mostly the dry low coastal belt, mostly, but they are. I think they prefer the arid coastal belt, but they found in the Indian side as well. So they are endemic to the South India and Sri Lanka. Where so they are there. So if you go in any time of the year, they are there. But if you like to see them in color, and if you like to see their babies, if you like to see them truly interacting in their wetland ecosystem, go in May and June, at the after New Year, Sinhala and Tamil New Year. 2 weeks after that, end of April, go there. Mannar or Hambantota. Mirijavila, a good spot. I first have most of our first initial sampling we done in Mirijavila, Hambantota. So any Salton, if you go there and spend some time, you will see these tiny birds running around, and sometimes on eggs, sometimes with chicks. They are doing some dancing to attract mates and so on. And that time of the year, there's very few migrants, so it is easy to see. So that's a time. But they are throughout the year. Leg banding doesn't have any problem. It's a myth. I think few people who are unfortunately anti-science, some people who are so used to view birds as a source of dollars, I think don't want to see anything done beyond showing them and earning a buck out of it. So it is them and their friends had this kind of unfortunate kind of thing created in Sri Lanka. Only in Sri Lanka. In other parts of the world, banding being considered as one of the main source of studying birds for birders. And most of the banding camps are run by birders, not by ornithologists or scientists. But in Sri Lanka, for some reason, as I mentioned, probably with few malicious reasons, some people, few, I would say about 6 or 7 in numbers.
All right.
So banding doesn't cause that problem, because if you do it right, and it's a very 200-year-old science, it doesn't cause any problem, because our birds, for example, banded in 2011, 2009, sometimes even earlier. Are there? There are records of 40-year-old birds, 75-year-old birds, banded birds, breeding and living. Like, for example, last 2 weeks ago, there was a story of 45-year-old banded bird being found. So banding doesn't cause any problems. Like any other study, there are certain dimensions has to be met, but it's perfect. Like you will see our banded birds in Mannar whenever you go without any problem. So as good. Yes.
So there are a couple of questions. Let me see if I get this wording right. So there's a question on why does a hybridized Dinopium Sarolus Bengalis appear in Trincomalee?
Yeah, because that's the hybrid zone. The hybrid zone goes from it's a kind of a diagonal from Putlam, so the western limits are Putlam to Mannar. The eastern coast limit is Trinco to Chundikulam. So if you draw two lines, that's kind of the Kilinochchi, south of Kilinochchi, Madavachia, Vilpattu National Park, Padaviya more red, north of Padaviya, and then the Iranamadu. So that is the belt, that is the hybrid zone. But the thing is that it's not spreading beyond that, partly because of the instability. The hybrid seems like losing out because the parental types are winning. So the weirdos get kind of kicked off from the system.
There was a question around, you spoke about the paradise flycatchers. Some people say that they can't fly too far. And, how come they are migrating from India to Sri Lanka? So is that a myth, or are they actually able to fly that far and people just think they can't fly? Second question connected with India, these two countries have been separated only, somebody says, maybe 8,000 years. So is that long enough to isolate the endemic scene in the island? Obviously, we are seeing a lot of endemics, but just elaborate a little bit on that.
I will answer the second question first, which is, I think, more important question. The answer to the first question is yes, they fly from Himalayas to here. So they can fly. I mean, paradise flycatcher, we all would agree they can fly. How about the avichya? I mean, avichya looks like, like barely jumping onto a bush when somebody somebody disturbed. And the rails, you never see them flying, but they fly. So they fly as flocks, mostly at night, in one go. From say Himalayas to here, something like that. So yes, they do fly. Okay. The second question is more important one. Sri Lanka and India is not separated by only 8,000 years. It's been separated by about 100 million years. When the global water level goes up, when the world is warmer, the glaciers melts and the sea level goes up. And when the sea level goes up, the connection between India and Sri Lanka get flooded. And when the world undergoes ice ages, the water get trapped as glaciers in the north and south poles. And as a result, the sea level drops. So Sri Lanka and India get connected. So this happened in 30,000 year cycles, roughly speaking. And there are many like say at least 20-30 such cycles had been passed. So you have situations where about 15,000 years Sri Lanka is separated from India, and another 15,000 years Sri Lanka is connected with India. So this mixing and isolation had created lots of interesting biodiversity in our parts, not just in Sri Lanka but in India as well. So it's an interesting thing. So it's not what the people referring is the last ice age, but there had been many ice ages through time over the past millions of years.
Sampath, what do they eat? What do they feed on? And there's also some questions people are curious about, what to expect in future and, what's around the corner, and whether you're willing to share some of the proposed scientific names. I'm not sure how much you can share. Everybody is saying you've excited everyone on those things.
The problem with the name, there is a small kind of thing in the zoological nomenclature that the name has to be validly and effectively published. So what is validly and effectively published means that it has to be go into a document that is legible, publicly available. That is the validity. Effectiveness. Validity is that it has to go through that proper process. So a talk like this or a newspaper article doesn't fall into that category. So, but since it is almost like a legal document, like a deed, this is like a legal document. Like legal means this is an official document that we are talking about for that species, for the name. So that has to go through that process. For that reason, we'll be not disclosing it at this stage, but you'll see it soon.
Any thoughts around woodpecker lifespan? And somebody is also asking, there's a question whether hybridity causes sterility.
Hybridity causes sterility is again a kind of a misnomer. There's lots of hybrids, especially in birds. It's very common. Hybridization doesn't cause sterility in most cases, but hybridization could have inferior offspring or superior offspring. When offspring is superior, they will take over and basically wiped off the parental types. That has happened in cases where when you introduce a type of fish, so if you introduce a cichlid into a system where there are other cichlids, and if the hybrids are more vigorous and hybrids are powerful, they will basically wipe off the entire system, and they will dominate after all. So that's a hybrid superiority. Hybrid inferiority is the system where parents hybridize and the hybrids die, or hybrids survive and produce offspring, but the offspring are less in number or they are inferior to the parents, so eventually they get wiped out. What we see in this dinopium system is a hybrid inferiority, where that the hybrids are kind of losing. How we know that? We've done mathematical models. When you ran the mathematical models, the hybrids are disappearing in the model in a rate where, so the system, even though hybridization is common, the hybrids don't have the same chance as the adults, parents. So they are not sterile. It's just that they are less fit. About age, you like the Hanuman plover is about this size. The red-backed woodpecker is about this size, and red-backed woodpecker, if you hold it incorrectly, it will poke holes in your fingers. Hanuman plover is an innocent animal; it can't do anything. You have to be careful, otherwise you will kind of damage the bird. But Hanuman plover would live about 10 years or 15 years, and the woodpecker won't stay that long. It will live about 6 years or 7 years. So shorebirds and seabirds, the birds live in wetlands, live much longer. Most people underestimate their age. Even these small birds live about 15 years. And slightly bigger waders live 30 years or more. Some seabirds live even longer. But forest birds tend to have shorter lifespans, say 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, something like that. So, yeah.
So, somebody's got slightly interested in something different, kingfishers. Anyway, we'll pop the question. Question around, how many kingfisher types here, and whether you've ever seen the blue-eared kingfisher.
No, I traveled from here to Potuville after Nadika kindly provided me the location that he photographed that bird the same day almost, and the next after a day after, Hasita, myself, and I think somebody else, three of us, we drove all the way to Mullaitivu coast. Didn't see the bugger. So, but I've seen blue-eared in other parts of the world. I'm a international birder. I backpack and do birding across the globe in all continents right now. So I've seen them, I guess.
Good. There are some questions on different topics. I'm trying to avoid them because I'm trying to keep the knowledge at a certain level. Question on publications to do with endemic birds and this and that in Sri Lanka. What are the good publications on endemic birds, and what would you recommend?
Sorry, I missed the last bit. Sri, I'm sorry, I was reading a question and I got distracted.
So you can answer if you want out of what you're reading.
Good. What was the question?
Around any good publication on endemic birds here?
That's an interesting one. To me, the best publication is this. I really like that one where I just. Okay, I can downstairs. The leg has Vincent Legg had published. I see it. Yeah. Anyway, Vincent Legg has published this big 4-volume thing. This collection. Yeah. That 3-volume book, and then later Tisara publication Prakashakyo had a separate volume on the 47 birds species that Legg had described as endemics into one smaller book. I had that book.
Anyway, Sampath, I went and got it for you. Sampath?
That's the one. No, I was talking about this one. So this is the kind of an abridged version which includes only the endemic ones that the Legg had mentioned. It's done by Tisara Prakashakyo later. To me, that is the best book on that's done in 1880. But it's Legg, reading Vincent Legg is quite rewarding. So to me,
What
that's the best book, Endemics.
what is the how is this going to be classed? Is it vulnerable or threatened? The Hanuman.
Hanuman Plover might be. I don't think it would be threatened. The problem is it's have environment. It's environment getting extremely vulnerable, increasingly vulnerable. But the good news for the Hanuman Plover, which is a kind of odd scenario, is that it's very small. So it doesn't need that sophisticated requirements as opposed to most other birds. For example, if you talk about a godwit or a crab plover or like a larger bird, it requires a substantial feeding area. It is very obvious, so it get targeted by people and animal predators. But since this is a smaller bird, it's kind of it can survive and it maintains good numbers. So it'll at least that's a good news. But the more important story, Shriyan, is that these birds would like when Deepal Varakoda described the Serendip scope owl, it creates a whole different level of awareness about our forest ecosystem, right? If it's like it provides that big sudden awareness and wanting to protect it, and so that I think is very powerful. So I wish that with after all these formal publications and all, like we could use Hanuman Plover as such a as that sort of a thing where if we lose our wetlands in Mannar and the northern regions, not just it'll lose like we would lose to support the Central Asian flyway, but our own biodiversity. Similarly, red-backed woodpecker, one of the commonest endemics, but it represents a very important component because without the red-backed woodpecker, most of the parrots will die because parrots need a woodpecker or a barbet to drill a hole. They can't, like very few animals, only in Sri Lanka, only only barbets and woodpeckers can drill their holes. And these holes get utilized by owls, all the parrots, the nuthatches, then the tits, great tit and all. So there and bats, and then tarantula, scorpions. So these guys are ecosystem engineers, and especially if you love parrots, love woodpeckers, because without woodpeckers parrots can't live, as simple as that. So why people wonder Colombo is having fewer and fewer parrots? Because Colombo is getting fewer and fewer woodpeckers. So parrots don't have a way to breed because they don't produce their own nesting cavities, right? Anyway, so these are important aspects.
The problem seems to be that some of the Mannar donkeys have migrated towards Colombo and seem to be influencing a number of things. So WNPS broke a number of stories on the issues of conservation in Mannar. And you remember we were one of the early people who reported on the Korakulam issue, and then of course now this sand mining thing. What do you think is going to be the implication, Sampath, of this disastrous sand mining expedition, which is getting unleashed? I mean, there's horror stories all over the country, but since we are focused on Mannar today, talk to us a little bit around that.
It's I mean it's almost like asking you put a bomb on a house and ask what would be the implications if the bomb erupts. Uh, so it's I think it's similar to that. What happened? Mannar is a low-lying sandy place. If you dig say 265 million tons of sand from a sandy island, you will leave with a hole. And the problem is the surrounding this hole is water called the fog bay. And the water will have this funny habit of settle in the lowest point. The other problem is, so that's one problem. So there won't be a Mannar Island there if you do that. The other problem, this is not like some kind of a wilderness place where a kind of multinational company can probably bribe few people and go there and make a havoc and earn a bug out of it and leave. This sandy, whatever this thing, has thousands of people living. Fishing communities, very old fishing communities of Tamil, Muslim, Sinhala communities, churches, like, temples, kovils, and then palm, like agriculture, uh, donkeys, cattle. So it's all there in that small real estate. So how you dig that? Then you have all these people. So what you have to do, you have to go and either bribe few of the people, give him motorbicycles or something, and push people slowly away, and then started to dig. The third problem is that where you get the sand out, how you ship that out, because the surrounding Pork Bay is one of the richest marine environments in the whole northern Indian Ocean. So you have a very sensitive sandy island nestled on a extremely sophisticated, sensitive marine ecosystem, which is highly productive. It used to give the pearl, like, world's best pearls. It's still giving some of the best stocks of blue swimming
Crab.
crab, and then very very productive in terms of fishery. It has endangered, like 8 endangered birds there, critically endangered birds. It has the critically endangered dugong. It has kind of endangered fishing community that had been hammered by 30 years of war, and now they are slightly kind of getting a breather, and now you're talking about like digging kind of sand out of their under their feet. So it's just I don't see any viability in this.
Let's hope some sanity will prevail, like we said, but this is just a passionate plea for anybody who can do anything about any of these mass destructions which are going on. It's just obscene. So, Sampath, just more on a human angle, there's a question around, what's one of the most interesting kind of things that you have learned while doing this? What's, some of the most fascinating things you've learned during your studies on birds? And I'm going to add the second part to this. Talk a little bit to the young people. What would you give as advice for some of the young up and coming scientists? I've seen someone who's been asking a lot of questions who I gather is only 12 years old. So like that, I haven't quoted names, but have you had lots of interesting questions coming up?
uh, as a researcher, uh, my suggestion is I sometimes I get almost pissed off, and sometimes I get really bored by seeing, the social media, some of the WhatsApp groups that I'm in. It's all about like displaying a photograph. Like you write something and no comments. It's just dry. And then as soon as you put a photograph of a tailor bird, like, wow, great capture, and then you have a string of wows, and that's it. So, so that, I think especially birds and mammals has that problem where, it's great that the people value the aesthetic beauty, and I mean that is, I think, the paramount of conservation. But for youngsters, my advice is that see beyond that pretty kind of veil. There's lots of science behind it, lots of information. There's lot more than that just simple prettiness, or like simple awesomeness of a tusker or a leopard. There's a lot more, like how they eat, how they breed, what they do at night, what they do at daytime. Like there's lot more to study, and so that culture has to be, I think, there for birds and mammals. I don't see that much in birds and mammals, but I see that in fish and reptiles and other forms, where lots of young researchers going deeper beyond that skin deep depth to understand the dynamics. But in birds and mammals, I think the simple aura of that charismatic life forms kind of prevent people thinking beyond and working beyond. So that's one advice to me. The second one, you have to be a bird if you wanted to study birds. I don't see any other way. So study birds, watch them, uh, try to learn more about them, go to the wilderness, but then come back and to the city, to the libraries, to the labs, to your institutes or to your workplace, and try to study more. And then you start to see that we live in a laboratory. We live in a very rich, diverse laboratory. Uh, as our home, like, like people travel thousands of kilometers to come to this sort of places to study, but we live in that place. So explore and try to see beyond a simple photograph or a drawing. uh, yeah. And then you meet interesting things. I mean, field work is never boring. It's like, we, especially with woodpeckers, Samin and I work in the northern provinces, with rehabilitated LTT soldiers. We could remember once one guy kind of milk a cow, so that we were early in the morning catching woodpeckers in that guy's kind of family yard. So he milked the cattle, a cow, and gave offer us milk, fresh warm milk. And then when we were drinking, he said, "Apita Sinhala ekka prashna nahi." That was the only Sinhala he could speak. So, I think it's one of the most kind of serene moments in my life, that, the way that's a, then we realized that somebody told us that he's a rehabilitated LTT soldier. So like that. So then we've been like, blessed by, like, all kinds of people all over the world, country. Interesting stuff. Yeah.
I think that's a good note on which to end, Sampath. There are a couple more different questions, but again, guys, I hope you continue to join us. Keep asking these questions. Sorry, we can't take all the questions for today, but Sampath, thank you very much for taking us on an enthralling journey. There's lots of comments. I'm having two screens here and looking at the different comments on Facebook and on this, and people are very, very appreciative. And I think you brought an entirely new light, not just on research and conservation, but on birding and science. And people like you inspire young people in the country to take after you. We see a huge amount of brain drain in the country, like you said, and we are fortunate to have people like you come back and continue, go overseas, learn with your 2 degrees or whatever you have, 2 PhDs, and then come back and bring that knowledge back. So we hope to see more of people like you emerging through the work that we do, you do, and others do in the country. So, on a closing note, again, just to remind everyone, next month we have an interesting talk supported by the Canadian Embassy. And, join us for that. We are stepping into the marine world with experts from 3 parts of the world, bringing 3 very different perspectives. Um, right. So, that's next week on the Marine Chat. And then next month we have another interesting lecture, thanks to the Canadian High Commission here. So there's going to be lots of interesting things going on. If any of you have small kids, there's a new arm of WNPS, the Wild Kids, who are doing some exciting stuff. So watch out for that work. Let me again thank the Nation's Trust Bank and wish them well in their new green wave. And we hope to catch you again. Thanks to all our corporate partners and sponsors. Again, don't forget to keep up the good fight. It's frustrating, especially these days, because whatever we are doing doesn't seem to reach a few people's heads, but we just need to keep going. Please support us with your subscriptions, donations, and your time and knowledge. That's what we need to continue this work. So we'll catch up again next month. Thank you, everyone, and good night from WNPS. This is Sriyan signing off. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.